So we're going to go to Representative Lee, if you're ready. Perfect. So Representative Lee has House File 2499, and she will move that House File 2499 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Representative Lee, yeah, Mr. Dahl can come forward, and Ms. Madden, you're on deck. I guess there's 3 chairs. You guys can probably all go snuggle up there. Representative Lee, to your bill.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that we're having this discussion today. So just very quickly, House File 2499 would expand the renter's credit to ensure parity in property tax refunds for renters, just like we provide for homeowners with the homestead credit. And since we have some new members, I want to remind folks that the changes that we made in the 2023 tax bill mean that the renter's credit is now a refundable income tax credit to renters whose rent and implicit property taxes are high relative to their incomes. The homestead credit is a state-paid refund to homeowners whose property taxes are also high relative to their incomes. So what does parity for the renter's credit mean if we were to bring it up to where the homestead credit is? This is where House File 2499 comes in. It first would nearly double the income cutoff for claimants by increasing it from $75,389 to $143,140, which is where the current cutoff is for the homestead credit. And then the second thing to do is raise the maximum credit to $3,500, just like the homestead credit. And this would be almost a $1,000 increase from the current level of $2,640 for the renter's credit. And in your packets, I direct you to the revenue note that shows increasing the household income range to the same level as the homestead credit would result in an estimated additional 80,000 renters who would qualify for this credit. The revenue note also tells us this is probably not a bill we can pay for in the current year, but it's important for us to ask ourselves why, or how we can close this inequity between renters and homeowners when both groups pay property taxes. And this is important because the renter's credit is a very effective tool to target assistance to the state's lowest income households. In 2022, 64% of households receiving the renter's credit had incomes of $40,000 or less. 30% of households who received this credit in 2022 also included senior citizens or people living with disabilities. Their average credit was $1,125, which was a higher average than the average claim statewide, showing how important this is to our seniors and neighbors living with disabilities. And in the handout in your packets from the Minnesota Budget Project, you'll see the runs of how much went to each county in tax year 2022. And while certainly the 7-county metro area had a lot of claimants, on par, I think if you look at the average claim amount, it's pretty sizable in certain places across the state that you would not imagine. I'd also like to point out that the share of participating households that includes seniors or people living with disabilities is actually higher in greater Minnesota. And we know this because in 20 greater Minnesota counties, at least half the participating households included seniors or people living with disabilities. And so that's just an overview from me. Next, I'd like to yield to my testifiers.
Thank you, Representative Lee. And yeah, so Representative Lee was referring to this document from the Minnesota Budget Project. It's really very interesting. Please check it out. Find your county. You'll see kind of that, I think people have like perceptions about who gets the renter's credit. It's really, it's certainly working families with kids, but it's a lot of seniors and folks with disabilities depending on where you're at across the state. So thank you, Representative Lee. Mr. Dahl, Nan Madden, welcome back to the committee. Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairs and members. My name is Nan Madden. I'm director of the Minnesota Budget Project. Just going to share some additional background information on the renter's credit. As Representative Lee mentioned, Minnesota has property tax refunds for both homeowners and renters. For renters, it's often called the renter's credit. And it recognizes the fact that while certainly it's the owners of a rental property that are responsible for paying the property taxes on that building, renters contribute to paying that property taxes through their rents. And for purposes of the renter's credit, it's assumed that 17% of the rent, 17% of the rent that renters have paid is considered going towards property taxes. So both the homeowner and renters' property tax refunds essentially put a cap on how much of a household's income can go towards property taxes. To qualify, renting households must have incomes below income limits, which for 2022 was about $70,000. The assumed share of their rent that is property taxes has to exceed a certain percentage of their income. So these are folks who are considered to be paying property taxes that are high for their income level. And then the housing that they live in needs to be paying property taxes or a payment in lieu of taxes to local governments. I also want to lift up some exciting changes to the renter's credit that were passed in 2023 and are in effect for the first time this filing year, which are meant to simplify the application process and expand the number of low and moderate income Minnesotans who receive their renter's credit. So this year, for the first time, Minnesotans will apply for their renter's credit, as Representative Lee mentioned, when they file their state income tax return. So previously, this application was a separate property tax refund application that was due in August. That's a time when there is less tax prep assistance available, so it can be harder for renters to get those refunds in. And secondly, the definition of a household's income for qualifying for and calculating the credit has been simplified. It is now based on a household's adjusted gross income, which is a measure that many other provisions of our tax law are based on, rather than a broader and much more complicated household income definition that was used previously. Some of the expected outcomes from this shift from a standalone application to putting the renter's credit on the income tax form is that it will increase participation among renters who already were eligible but were not able to manage the process of applying. It gets refunds out to renters much earlier in the year because of being synced with the income tax filing process. And some more renters will qualify and some renters will get a larger property tax refund. In conclusion, I just want to thank Representative Lee for her attention to the differences in property tax refunds between homeowners and renters. Sometimes those differences have a good policy reason, and sometimes they appear to be more arbitrary. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Dahl.
Good morning, co-chairs Gomez and Davids and members of the committee. My name is Michael Dahl, and I'm the Public Policy Director with Homeline, a statewide tenant advocacy organization. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House File 2499. It's always been puzzling to me that there hasn't been parity between tenants and homeowners with respect to the renter's credit and the homestead credit. So I want to thank you, Representative Lee, for being the chief author for this bill, which finally proposes fairness between the two. Let's face it, low-income renters are struggling to make it. According to the Minnesota Housing Partnership Report, State of the State's Housing 2024, the median rent increased by 8% in just 1 year, the largest increase in the past decade. Also, for several decades, renters have grappled with housing costs that have been rising in faster than their wages. This is exacerbated by a significant lack of supply. Minnesota is just short of 114,000 units of housing that are not available for extremely low-income households. Well, these needs are issues that housing committees need to address. I want to say that there's no denying that the renter's credit provides essential help to struggling tenant households. By raising the maximum credit and income limits, more renters will have additional funds to cover basic necessities. Homeline speaks with renters regularly about what they use the renter's credit for. They use it to purchase items like school supplies and their kids' clothes and to get a head start on holiday gifts for the family. They also use this to obtain new eyeglasses or take an overdue trip to the dentist. They stock up on household supplies and non-perishable groceries and take some time to catch up on overdue bills. They've also told us that they use this to get car repairs done. These are major expenses. They're also basic necessities that renters have that compete with their housing costs. So to see this relief is something that is very much welcomed. Achieving parity between the renter's credit and the homestead credit is not only fair, it will help households struggling to make ends meet move closer to stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Moving now, are there to member discussion? Are there comments or questions? Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When people are making decisions about buying houses, they look at everything. They look at the deductibility of mortgage interest. They look at just the whole cost structure, because it isn't just, when you're buying a house, it isn't just what the payment is, it's everything else that's included. And I think we, from a public policy standpoint, should be trying to encourage people to buy homes. We know that that's a much more stable thing. That's what people want. And so by, this, if anything, I would do the opposite. I would increase the credit for the homestead for lower income families. So I just want to point that out. There's reason for this, and we're going to get, whatever we do with taxes, we're going to get more of what we incentivize. I want to incentivize home ownership. So I would be opposed to this bill on that basis. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lee, or you don't have to respond. That was more of a statement, I guess. All right. Representative Hewitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Lee, thank you for bringing this bill. As you know, I'm a realtor, and I do see incentives in this bill as a realtor that where I do my farming, that's what we call it, is I go to those people that are living in apartments or rental housing, and I see if they're ready, if they're set to buy a home. And by doing that, we also look at their finances, like my friend across the aisle said, and we look at the whole picture. And realistically, there is no way to buy a house for no money down. So I think this program would let them put money in reserve and move forward with, if they choose to buy a house, not for everybody, but if they choose to buy a house. And then I think we have a number of incentives for homeowners, and there are state mortgage deductions, stuff like that. So I really appreciate it, and I understand your line of thought, Representative, but I think this is a great bill, and it will help us move the housing market a little bit too.
Thank you. Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's funny, the microphone just fell apart. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Hewitt, Madam Chair, and Representative Hewitt, it's already been a long morning, for bringing the perspective of the real estate market, because as we know, especially from many of the bills moving through our committees right now, that we have a lack of housing and lack of affordable housing, especially for folks to buy. I have 3 kids in their 20s. I'm very lucky that one was able to buy a house here, but it was a struggle to find something in their price range. So it's a yes and. We have to do all of it. But I want to particularly point out something that Representative Lee pointed out, is that 30% of our folks that are in rentals are folks that are seniors or folks with disabilities. So a lot of our seniors as well, not just the ones that are in rental, are looking to downsize, and trying to find a smaller house to downsize into is also almost nearly impossible for their price range. So a lot of our seniors, like my parents, have downsized into an apartment and should be able to take advantage of this credit. That's why it needs to be beefed up. So the housing market is struggling right now in having enough capacity for folks that want to choose how they live and where they live. So anything we can do to help that out would be great. Thank you, Representative Lee, for bringing this conversation forward.
Thank you, Chair Joachim. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. Thank you, Representative Lee. The question I have is, how does this guarantee or that landlords or property owners will not just see this, oh, well, they have more opportunity to pay more rent? How do we prevent this from not just ending up in landlords' pockets?
Representative Lee.
Well, I think the argument is, I mean, it already does, right? So when you pay your rent, you pay implicit property taxes.
Representative Johnson.
I guess, thank you, Chair Gomez. I guess the question is this is going to increase the credit for property taxes paid, in my understanding, so that means they have more money coming back to them. how does the landlord not just say, oh, well, they now have $1,000 or $1,500 more in their pocket now because of this rental credit, that they don't just say, oh, now we have an opportunity to raise the rent and it doesn't result in rent inflation?
Representative Lee?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is a common thing that people ask, and I would just say, the housing market is broken. I want to go back to addressing one of Rep. Anderson's points. Home ownership is increasingly out of reach for Minnesotans, right? And so when we look at housing as a continuum, whether it's buying a house or renting or shacking up with your in-laws, housing is out of reach for folks. And so this is one of the tools that we have to fix a market that is failing folks. And certainly, yes, there are really bad landlords that do that. But we also know that, in that market also tops out, right? And so that could happen. But we're also hoping that this tool that we are implementing would help correct for in the market.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Representative Johnson, excuse me, I will just say that the calculation for the renter's credit is based on, the percentage of the rent paid that is implicitly goes to property taxes and the tenant's income. And so, I mean, I don't know, that'd have to be a pretty crafty landlord to try to figure out the calculation of like, what is the tenant's income and what's their credit going to be, and then jack up the rent. I mean, hopefully people aren't doing that, but we don't have a lot of mechanisms to control rent, it turns out. But Representative Johnson, did you have anything further on that?
So, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Kozlowski.
Thank you, Chair Gomez, and to Representative Lee and team for bringing this bill forward. Coming from the Housing Committee, and I think we should be talking about housing in every committee, I really support efforts like this that are going to make sure that we're uplifting and boosting renters, which is very much a valid form of housing as somebody who grew up in all kinds of rental units as a kid. And, I'm lucky now to have been a first-gen homeowner, to the points that were made earlier about, helping folks that we have 114,000 unit shortage, especially for our most deeply affordable housing. And, 50% of our renters are cost burdened. In the latest report from Minnesota Housing Partnership that put out that, it's especially impacting our rural singles, seniors, families, and average rent increase because of our shortage and because of cost inflations that renters are bearing the brunt off of their back. The average rent increase has been $1,200. And so I think that's already happening, that renters are being siphoned, that the average age of owning a home is 38 years old. And so being able to build up that nest egg, being able to have a place to lay your head and dream and build a life. But also not everybody wants to live in a home. People want to live in rental units. They want to live in townhomes and condos. And one of the things that your testifier up here is with the tenant hotline that we've been working on. And I think, if I recall, that the certificates for rent paid were one of the things that increasingly are coming up in these efforts to make sure that tenants and landlords understand their rights and responsibilities, but that requests for certificates for rent paid and to be able to access these tax credits is coming up and bubbling to the surface. And I'm just curious if you can talk about how the efforts are being done to make sure that folks know that this credit's available and to claim it, and then what more would be done in expanding these opportunities.
I'll go to Representative Lee. I also, I don't know if the testifiers have thoughts on that last question of Representative Kozlowski's. Rep. Lee.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So after we enacted the 2023 tax bill, I know Commissioner Marquardt came and kind of did a recap. I believe there are a number of things that the department has been doing. One of which is this certificates of rents paid. There is now an electronic system that they are trying to convince a lot of landlords to I guess, join. It's a voluntary process right now. I forget if we're going to move to make it mandatory, but basically, right, like if you're a renter, your landlord would like mail you this piece of paper certifying how much rent you've paid in the past year. If we make it electronic, that's much easier. And then the fact that we changed the renter's credit to be part of your income tax has been really helpful, because a lot of people did not know they had to do this, random form in like at the end of summer, and read like 30 pages of a guideline to fill out to get this money that they were entitled to. And so there are a bunch of folks that have been doing outreach on that. And then one of the things that has been really helpful is us funding VITA sites, right? And making sure that, these sites across the state are helping people understand that this is a credit that they are entitled to.
Thank you, Representative Lee. So I'll just add, like excuse me, we heard a bill about increasing that support for tax preparation and tax outreach. And so we included money for that in the 23 bill. And in 2024, we didn't really do our tax bill as such, but we included the advanced payments for the child tax credit. And so we also included some of that tax outreach assistance dollars in 2024. And we certainly can do more, but I think sort of round one of that in 23 was really focused on the child tax credit. Round two of that, the 2024 funding, was focused on advance payments for child tax credit and this conversion of the renter's credit. But, to your point, and Representative Lee and Ms. Madden talked about this, the change that we made to the renter's credit, we didn't change the parameters of the program at all, but by switching it to a refundable income tax credit, we're just making it so that tens of thousands, I can't remember the exact number, it might be 100,000 renters who are entitled to the credit, they believe will claim it now. But your point about, ensuring that when we do big changes to tax policy, we have to be able to figure out how to communicate that to regular people who are, going to be filing their taxes is a good one. And we've taken steps in this committee to try to do that support and be mindful of, both the department doing a lot of outreach and also partnering with community organizations to push that outreach forward. But we need to continue that effort. And Ms. Madden, or Mr. Dahl, or I don't know if both of you guys want to go. We'll go to Ms. Madden, go first.
Sure. Thank you for that question. And Madam Chair, the fiscal estimate for the policy change to move the renter's credit onto the income tax form, Department of Revenue estimated that change would result in nearly 120,000 more households who were eligible starting to claim that renter's credit for which they already qualified. And maybe I'll add also that I believe the department has a proposal in this year's governor's plan to make sure that landlords are getting that certificate of rent paid out to renters, as that's an essential piece of information that renters need to file for this renter's credit.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl.
Chair Gomez and Representative Kozlowski, I wanted to point out that Homeline is actually one of the organizations that is being partnered with the Department of Revenue Resources. We take 20,000 calls each year. Many of them are extremely low-income households, and we tell everybody who calls us what it is that they're entitled to as part of the renter's credit. And so we are doing that outreach to thousands of renters, letting them know that this change has happened in the law and could feasibly be telling them that there's also an increase in resources available through the changes that Representative Lee is proposing.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Is there further discussion? Representative Anderson.
Just quickly, that part of the tax bill was a good part of the tax bill, so.
Thanks.
Because it was very complicated
Yeah.
for people to, I've been both a landlord in the past and I did my kids' rent credits on their taxes. And it's very complicated, historically. And I think the electronic is a really good system too, because it is, you're going to get a lot more people, small landlords to do that. that way, so, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Representative Anderson. I'll go to you for final comments, but I wanted to just say a couple things. You know, first of all, I was glad that Chair Joachim kind of shared the experience of her family, because it speaks to an issue, and Representative Kozlowski spoke to this also, but, you know, housing is a continuum. And when you don't have, you know, places for seniors who have raised their family in a house that's maybe too big for them, when there's nowhere for them to go, they don't go anywhere. And then that house, you know, that might have been a good starter home for another family is not available to them. And this is an issue about supply all along the continuum of housing. And, you know, I think that housing is actually a place where we can find a lot of common ground across other kind of ideological differences that we might have in this body. I'm really encouraged to see some of the bipartisan work about increasing housing supply all along the continuum of housing that's happening. And, you know, you talked about the mortgage interest deduction, and that is a calculation that people sometimes take into account when they're considering actions, you know, whether they're going to buy a house or not. But I just really, you know, I need to continue to point out that the last time I saw, since we doubled the standard deduction, 96% of people take the standard deduction. It doesn't make sense for them to itemize. And so we are still spending $80 million a year. It goes up, I mean, in the tax expenditure budget, I think the 29 numbers, maybe more around $125 million a year, right? To subsidize mortgages for some of those 4% of people who itemize deductions. And so we have to ask ourselves, are the top 4% of earners, are they making decisions about when to buy property based on this tax preference that they're getting? Is that the best way for us to spend $80 to $125 million if we were trying to open up opportunities for home ownership, which I think we all agree is good for people, it's good for families, it's good for generational wealth, it's an important thing. And, you know, we have to acknowledge that we have we have a very high home ownership rate overall in Minnesota, one of the highest in the country. But we also have one of the deepest disparities, especially between Black people and Native people and white people, in home ownership rates. And so, you know, there are tens of thousands of Minnesotans across the state, in all parts of our state, who make enough money to own a home, to buy a home, to pay off a mortgage, who have the credit that they need, and they don't have that critical down payment, right? And a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but if you're a middle-class person or an upper-middle-class person, there's almost certainly somebody in your family who is able to help you if you're a young person, you know, to come up with that down payment. And a lot of people do not have that kind of support. And so, you know, in 2023, Representative Kozlowski was also, you know, I'm sure a bunch of members were on the Housing Committee, but we did the first generation homebuyer down payment assistance. I think it was like $100 million, but it was one-time money. But here we are spending $100 million ongoing to subsidize mortgage interest for the 4% of people who itemize their deductions. And I think that we really need to take a look at that. It's something that's in the purview of the tax committee. And if we share the goal of moving more people into home ownership, you know, there's money that we're already spending in this area that's not going to, you know, that I would argue is not kind of going to that shared goal of increasing home ownership opportunities for people who otherwise have been boxed out of them. But sorry, that's not the topic of this bill, but it's a little bit of a personal pet concern of mine. So.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Chair David.
I thought you were filibustering when you have the gavel. Go figure.
I sometimes do a little bit of a weave when I speak, and Chair Davids thinks I'm filibustering, but maybe. Okay, Representative Lee, any final comments on your bill?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I really appreciate the discussion, and I mean, I think, like I talked about, housing is a continuum. I think if there's two things to take away from today's discussion, it's first, renters pay property taxes, and as Mr. Dahl highlighted, there is an affordability crisis in renting, and like we heard from Rep, or in the discussion here, there's also a home ownership crisis. And so, you know, for us, we need to do more. We are doing a lot for homeowners. We should do more for renters, as that is an emergent need. And then the second thing is very clearly, like, this is a policy decision. According to my research, the legislature enacted our property tax refund program in 1975. And in 1983, they set the income limit at $40,000 for both homeowners and renters. And since then, the legislature has made numerous changes to our PTR program for both homeowners and renters. But you know, something I'd like to point out, and I know Chair Davids does not like inflators, is when, coincidentally, right, when you look at you know, the income cutoff for homeowners for the homestead credit, it's pretty close to keeping up with inflation. We've actually outperformed that $40,000, but for renters, we have not. And so this is very clearly a policy decision that we can make here. I'd also note that you know, in 2022, when we elected the most diverse freshman class in race, in sexual orientation, and also just economic, I guess, well-being, right? There are more renters in the legislature now than there ever have been. And so I think we should ask ourselves why, you know, this very important population, you know, has not been helped versus all the other homeowners who have been in the legislature for a very long time. So with that, I will close.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Chair Davids, you good? All right. With that, Representative Lee will renew her motion that House File 2499 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2025 tax bill, and it is laid over. Thank you so much.